Now it's working. Let's do that all over again. Hello, now you should be able to hear me? Question mark maybe? Okay. Well, hello everybody. My name is Iolite Leaf Ocean. Today I will be reading um the first draft of my memoir, Thrive Despite the Horrors. It's my memoir on bullying, abuse, and the perseverance of the human condition. For my creative nonfiction writing class, I was given the assignment to write a memoir, and we haven't even started yet, and I already wrote like 30 pages, so I'm definitely overshooting this a bit. But I my editing writing process is this is part of it, is reading my own work to myself and then going back over it and seeing how it's heard and then going through it and then editing it based off of that, and revising it that way. So whether you enjoy it or whether you don't enjoy it, if you have any constructive criticism, leave them in the comments here. I am streaming this. I will not be posting this, but I am streaming this for the world, which I don't expect many to see this, but doesn't matter because this is my editing process. I'm recording this so that I can go back and refine this later. But this is my first draft of my memoir. So, yes, take that as you will. Trigger warnings, and there's many. The trigger warnings are bullying and harassment, suicide and suicidal ideation, child abuse, rape, and stalking. Please be warned. The following memoir contains some pretty explicit and heavy subjects. Names have been adjusted for anonymity. Do keep in mind that there is a positive conclusion, as I am still alive and doing great now, but I tell this story because it is a testament to the human endurance of suffering and the consequences of it, but also to how one may prevail through these darknesses and come out strong despite the circumstances of the situation forthcoming. I'm doing okay now. I'm in therapy with a good support system. Though the government may have failed me to deliver justice, I lived and somehow learned to thrive, not just despite it, but the lessons learned from the experiences have taught me how to help others empathize with others whom experience similar. Please take breaks when reading this for your own health and safety. You are loved. Now we got 6 chapters and an introduction to this already, and this is the first draft, so you can only imagine how much longer it's going to get after this first draft. But this is the table of contents. We got the introduction, the prologue, earliest memories, the middle list of schools, the worst year, lifelong learning curve, and healing in the now. Starting with the introduction. You are not required to go quietly into the night. The dark will always lurk, offering peace in silence, but you must refuse it. Instead, you must fight with every muscle and limb for your right to be seen as you. My life has been a long, grueling study in this battle, a chronicle of familial abuse, of friends who acted as enemies, of the haunting consequences of my father's final choice, and of my own repeated attempts to end the pain. This is how I learned to make the evening sky vibrant with my noise, and how I found the freedom that is ever giving by finally standing up to the one bully I couldn't escape, myself. What I experienced behind closed doors was so utterly normalized that I thought everyone's parents beat them and touched them without asking first. Without knowing better, I took that awful blueprint and spent my adolescence hurting people who never deserved it. I was a child of abuse, but I had become a magnet for the very toxicity I hated. It took years of self destruction and deconstruction, of looking at the damage done to others and the self inflicted wounds, to realize that the most dangerous bully I had ever met was staring back at me in the mirror. There are certain years in a life that act as a hinge, swinging you either towards the light or into permanent darkness. Or I like to say semi permanent, but not poignant enough. For me, that year was 2016, the one that stole my dad to suicide and forced me to flee a school where my friends had become my worst tormentors. That was the year I learned the two opposing truths. that some darknesses can never be outrun, and that the only honest fight I had left was the one to stay breathing. This is a story about the endurance of suffering, a testament to what the body and mind can survive when the rest of the world has given up on you. We are all born as blank slates unto the world to impress itself upon us. From the beginning, our first memories formulate how we will be for the rest of our lives. No one is born good or evil, or even with concepts of such ideals in the first place. These behaviors are taught. Everything we witness in our earliest life is an example of how we will take on this world we are fresh to. How our parents treat us and each other, how people react to our presence in public, the noise things make, the unspoken nonsense rules we are enforced, all are observations we begin making from the moment we first open our eyes. Despite this, so many parents forget that their little munchkins are, in fact, living, breathing humans that will one day grow old too. Some folks might have the audacity to call people who treat their children as objects as opposed to living and breathing and growing people parents, but that is only true in a literal sense, as they gave birth to slash helped create slash adopted the child in question. True parenthood, in my humble opinion, is stored in one's ability to see their children, and by extension, all children, as the human beings they are, and treat them with respect accordingly. Too often are parents quick to judge their child, scorn them, or cast them with belittling words without a second thought. Many call their friends, children, or family members pet sperms or similar dehumanizing titles. Children have minds of their own, and they absorb every little stimulus in the world around them. How others treat them in these formative years is how they will treat themselves and those around them later down the line. So, by setting proper examples of bodily autonomy, consent, and personal identity security early in a child's life is essential to a confident and happy adult. By denying children their right to be human until a certain age, it leaves them vulnerable and sometimes even incapable of defending or taking care of themselves once in late teens and early adulthood. By not forming these concepts of empathy earliest as possible in a young child's life, that could possibly expose them to all kinds of harshities. For example, when a child first enters school, it is the first time they are away from their parents for an extended period. More often than not, concerning behaviors are made known in elementary school, but never is the source of these behaviors properly examined until far too late to intervene. Childhood bullies are often, but not always, neglected at home, which then causes them to take their emotions out on their peers, in some cases, because the child honestly believes that this is an appropriate way to react due to the exposure. I by no means was an exception. I was horrifically abused and bullied at home, but instead of just lashing out, I also turned to self destructive behaviors. I wouldn't say I was a bully, but I definitely was toxic as hell when I reached puberty and made my first friends. But with friends like I had then, who needed enemies? What I experienced behind closed doors was so normalized to me, I thought everyone's parents. Oh, okay, so I repeated this line. Let me cut that right there. What I experienced behind closed doors was so normalized to me, so of course, without knowing better, I hurt many people who never deserved it because I thought it was the way I was supposed to treat others. I was set an awful example of how to love myself and to love my friends. I had no other examples to go off of either. I had to take the looking glass and examine it deeper, really ponder what and why and how I was hurting myself. I was fed up, but I had no idea where to regurgitate, and the knot in my stomach only grew with the time I ignored it. Eventually, I broke free of my self hatred, and with it, I shed my old habits of self deprecation and self destruction. Sometimes, bullies can have the best parents ever. However, this is where the concerns extend beyond nurture, and nature should be considered instead. Perhaps there is a psychological explanation, such as sociopathy. If appropriate intervention is taken and the child is admitted into a consistent therapy routine, many sociopaths and psychopaths can lead successful lives, never harming or considering harming another. The stereotypes surrounding these diagnoses can be difficult to wrap one's head around, but with humility and empathy leading the conversation, peace can always be reached. Even if there is not a mental health reason for a person's ill willed behavior, early stern intervention is a fantastic way to prevent an issue such as bullying from festering in the first place. After navigating through the raw, often harrowing landscapes of familial abuse, bullying, self harm, and profound loss, the ultimate victory is simply this: I am here. This memoir is a testament to the fact that while the government may have failed to deliver justice, life can still be lived somehow, and somehow thrived in. Excuse me. The journey detailed within these pages, from the initial blueprint of self destruction and attracting attractive monsters to the lowest point um, at the bus station, and eventually finding new routes and a support system, was not a race to be run, but a painful, necessary metamorphosis. The lessons learned from enduring such a darkness are not about escaping the past entirely, but about re engineering the self from the rubble. I learned that the cycles of toxicity only break when you stand up to the one bully you can never run from in the mirror, and to embrace them and tell that scared child inside us all that it will be okay. The storm will pass. It requires a daily, deliberate act of defiance, speaking proactively to that inner self, choosing to say something positive about the person you see, even on the days where you so desperately want to shatter that reflection. The fight for survival taught me the enduring lesson of empathy and how to help others who have experienced similar darknesses. It taught me the freedom that is ever giving, the right to be seen as you. So, when the darkness inevitably lurks and offers the deceptive peace of silence, I urge you to remember the central truth of my journey. You are not required to go quietly into the night. Be the tuberose that trumpets in the moonlight, brave and unyielding. Shout for every last breath you take, fight with every muscle and limb, and make the evening sky vibrant with your noise. Look around the life you have built. Find gratitude for the support system and therapy that anchor you to now, and finally understand life is not a race. Enjoy the journey. Chapter 1, Prologue. Picture it, 1995. The world was vibrating with the noise of new technology and old trauma. Windows 95 hummed from every beige monitor. The ghost of Oklahoma City still cast a shadow, and the nation, polarized by the OJ verdict, sought comfort in the bright plastic warmth of Toy Story. Into this chaotic backdrop, my older half brother, Jay, was born. My mother was a young 23-year-old woman, drawn into a partnership with a man nearly twice her age, whose adult children were nearly the same age as her. Their meeting was stained with the industrial scent of lacquer and gasoline inside an auto paint shop. She was painting and detailing automobiles under his supervision, a dynamic that mirrored the control that would define their short years together. The relationship, built on this foundation of workplace hierarchy, was brittle. It dissolved, leaving behind a residue of bitterness around the turn of the millennium, circa 2000 to 2001. The man, who I will refer to as R, was by every account a sleazebag and a convicted offender. His life was governed by abuse, particularly a habit of misusing drugs such as Benadryl. This drug abuse culminated in a terrifying close call that should have served as a siren. My then infant brother, Jay, accidentally ingested R's medicine, triggering seizures so severe he required his stomach to be pumped. R had initially groomed my mom into the relationship, establishing a blueprint of exploitation and control. He eventually died of cancer, an exit met with zero grief or dismay. I often returned to this morbid history, wondering if R was the true or toxic origin point. A shithole of a person who demonstrated to my mother that if you treated the world with contempt, no one would ever truly hold you accountable. She wasn't exactly wrong either, to be fair. My mother's abuse came wrapped in a perverse justification. She often deflected her actions by blaming her own parents for supposedly failing to discipline her. As she would beat or abuse me, she'd parrot the lie that she was doing it out of love, claiming my grandmother's refusal to spank her was the original sin. Years later, studying psychology at college, the cold clinical facts finally validated my deepest instincts. Physical discipline is profoundly ineffective and detrimental to a child victim's mental health. The beatings I endured were torture that, when inflicted upon an adult, would constitute a serious criminal offense. This clarity solidified the difference between a loving correction and calculated cruelty. But before the truth could ever be known, her life was fueled by a chronic corrosive jealousy. When she broke up with R, she fixated on his adult children, who had recently started their own families. To feel superior, to claim a new kind of victory, she needed a new baby. She embarked on a hunt to find a new man to exploit for the labor of love. He found her in the open spring air of the downtown city park, sitting on a blanket while she played her guitar. My father, D, was everything R was not: naive, goofy, and sweet as candy. He fell instantly for her deceptive siren song. The cycle was mercilessly quick. Only a few months passed before she was pregnant, and I arrived in December of 2001. For a fleeting moment, the air held the false promise of peace. But that fragile calm shattered almost instantly, and everything began its inevitable cascading fall. Chapter 2: Earliest Memories. My first memory is a violent one. I was an infant. Couldn't walk, couldn't talk. I was on the cold tile floor in the beige, tattered kitchen of the first house I ever knew, a trailer park in New York. I don't remember what exactly happened, but I have had the story told back to me enough times that I put it together. I began to cry, and my mother had a stressful day at work. She was preparing coffee for herself when the handle of her favorite mug broke off, causing her to throw the broken handle piece at my face, cutting my face from the bottom of my lip to the peak of my chin. This scar, right there, though now small and almost unnoticeable, is still on my face to this day. I was not the target, however. The true target, was my father, whom had only recently injured his spine severely in a work injury, which led him disabled permanently. He had to go to physical therapy, get surgery, and was on many different painkillers. My mother refused to accept this as an excuse, though. She made it her life's purpose to constantly harass him for his inability to provide financially. She would also use him to get drugs. He was against drugs vehemently, but after they broke up when I was about 4 years old, the only way my dad was allowed to see me was if he got drugs from my mom. Every interaction I remember between my mom and my dad was filled with one-sided hostility from my mother's side. All my dad wanted was, from the get-go, was to get to know and take care of his only son. My mother wanted easy and free drugs, so that is exactly what she got. My dad was bisexual, and after breaking up with my mom, he moved in with his long-term best friend and secret romantic partner, Kay. Later in life, I realized they weren't just friends, as they shared a bed together, but we never really had that conversation before his untimely departure. Kay was like a second father to me. He took care of me, cared about me, got me gifts for my birthday and holidays. I always felt safe when in the home of my dad and Uncle Kay. However, when my dad finally stood up to my birth giver's reign of terror after I began to tell my dad how she would hit me and treat me at home, she decided to take a step way too far. She falsely accused my father of molesting me. He would never do such a horrific act against me. In truth, only a few years later, the accusation my mother slew against him would really be a confession for what she wanted to do to me. Even still, at 8 years old, I had to testify in court that he never touched me inappropriately. Unfortunately, this didn't matter, as he was not allowed to see me for years until visitations and therapy were finally approved. But by then, it was too late. The damage had been done, and my father was deeply depressed over the time lost with his only child. The harassment from my mother never stopped either. She constantly harassed him on social media, bullied him behind fake accounts, spread rumors about him, lied to his friends and prospective partners about him, and genuinely overall ruined his life. My mother was relentless with the debauchery, harassing prospective jobs to not hire him, and he ran his own business out of his home fixing computers. But even still, she tried to scare away clients as well. Over the course of 10 years, the weight became too much to bear for him. He did what unfortunately most would do in his situation, and considering this was 10 straight years of torture, he ultimately ended his own life when I was only 14 and he was 38, and his body was discovered on the floor of his kitchen with the fridge door open on June 17th, 2016. Throughout this series of events, I was also bullied in school. In early elementary school, I was chased and isolated, nicknamed Squirrel, among other nicknames. There was one boy who thought it was hilarious to call me a flying squirrel, and at first I thought he was laughing with me with this statement. However, when he would then dogpile me literally and push me around when saying this, I realized perhaps it was not a friendly gesture. Elementary school, elementary school was hell for all I can remember. I spent my recesses hiding and running away or crying silently, scared and hidden. There was another blond boy who was the most popular the entire time I went to that school. He loved to chase me down and sting me with bees, which I was allergic to. There was a nest in a tree in the corner of the playground, and he was somehow pretty apt at catching them when they pollinated flowers to then hunt me down with. This same boy was the first person to introduce homophobia to me, as he would call me a queer. I had no idea what that word meant, but he used gay as an insult, an example of how the verbiage used at home leak into the mouths among those youngest and most impressionable. Another time, I was swinging on the swing set and was pushed off the swing, causing me to nearly bite through the middle of my tongue with my two front teeth upon landing, leaving another permanent visible scar. Even the teachers there were apathetic at best with my treatment. I barely even got a call home to tell them I was dripping blood from my mouth. I was labeled defiant, and I spent much time in the principal's office or in the nurse's office. Who cares what happened to me, the insolent and petulant child? This mentality was branded onto my forehead from every angle it felt. Chapter 3, Middlest of Schools. The bullying followed me into middle school. I had never made a real life friend before the summer of 2012, but that winter I got my first laptop, a shitty, shiny, sparkly pastel pink EPC laptop. The whole new world of complexity and wonder opened up to me. I was all over this internet thing. I spent hours on YouTube, Omegle, IMVU, Webkins, Club Penguin, and the like. I was exposed to a wide array of perspectives, including some really, really shitty ones. The naive young child that was me then adhered to these negative shit faces like they were fact. After all, I was just a kid, and all these older people are telling me that I am ugly, worthless, and cringe, and they have never even met me. I was back then drawn to the disgusting misogynistic neglect of Onision's channel, a notorious, infamous pedophile who groomed young teen girls into sending inappropriate photos to him to review and rate for his YouTube content. Sick fucks like that make me want to vomit now because they corrupt the minds of the most vulnerable mass. Young children coming into puberty, and especially their self worth and esteem, prepping them to be easily submissible to a predator. I interacted with many, and I also had access to Google and began searching all these words I was picking up. I love to read. It opens the window of the mind to a fresher air and simultaneously expands the space outward. I began to search these words I was labeled with across the board by everyone in my life, in person and online alike. Fag, queer, tranny, depressed, autistic, retarded, and similar. And I was met with many hard pills to swallow when it came to where I was at. I had always been different, no denying it. Now these labels were expanded, defined. I put into context what these people were saying to me for real. It was not a pleasant reflection. I couldn't help how I was born, however. I am pansexual, I am transgender, and I am intersex. That is how I was made to be. It was how I was born. It was immutable. the cards of life reality had dealt me. Growing up, I had no perception of gender, really. It made no sense to me. I hated the frills, the constant play of makeup, and feeling like a dress up doll to my family to play with, not a human. When I hit puberty at 9 and had my first period, I knew something was horribly wrong. My development was chaotic. My periods were irregular and lasted for weeks with heavy bleeding. Mood swings were awful. All of this so early, I hadn't even had to talk yet. I was terrified. I thought I was dying. My family acted like it was normal and explained to me that I was coming of age. But this didn't make any sense. My parts did not look like the pictures in the Your Body is Changing book at all. It looked like something in between the two, if anything. Why was it so irregular? No one had answers for me for years to come. It really didn't help when my mom would make inappropriate comments about my body and these characteristics either. I had always felt more masculine, if anything, and I began experiencing heavy body dysphoria when I began to develop female sex characteristics. At the same time, I noticed oddities that confused me about this development. Once the proper words found me and I did more research, I began experimenting with masculine pronouns, a different name, and a shorter haircut, as well as clothes that felt comfortable to me, even if I had to modify them myself with sewing. My family was not accepting for a long time at first, but I was unstoppable at that point. Even if I was suicidal then, I would rather die dreaming. I became a self advocate for myself in at least one sector. I knew that I was a he they kind of guy. I came out first to my friends at 11, then to my middle school around 13ish, and eventually to my family, one at a time. Surprisingly, despite the occasional bullying there, my identity was widely respected by most students and teachers. There was definitely bullying happening in middle school, but hey, it wasn't mainly homophobia, so that is something, right? It was usually racism. It was a huge problem, honestly. I had gathered a couple so called friends in the few years I was in middle school, one of which was a Jewish girl, M. She took advantage of my kindness and naivety. At the lunch line, one could purchase chocolate chip cookies if so desired. M told me that if I wanted to be her friend, I had to buy her cookies. Naively, with no prior experience of friendship before this, I accepted this as fact and began buying cookies for her to sit with me at the lunch table. At the table during lunchtime, excuse me. This girl, though she used me, was my first example of friendship, and by extension, manipulation and breaches of trust. However, I was steadfast to defend her despite this, even once my mom noticed how much of my lunch money was going to cookies and realized what was happening, stripping me of even having an allowance. Years later, one day, in 8th grade, she was sitting in the hallway during free time, and a boy who we'll call P comes up to her in his usual style and begins spitting anti Semitic jokes at her direction. I, that day, was having a particularly awful day, and when he said to her, Hitler missed a Jew one more time, something inside me snapped. I came up behind him and put him in a chokehold, held him there as his arms flailed, and whispered in his ear, If I ever hear that you did this to anyone ever again, I will find you, and I won't let go next time. I held him there until he croaked out, Okay! And he scrambled off like a scared little weasel. I had never heard of another incident like that since, and I think this effect really did last, because later, when I was on the commons, he spotted me while I was walking the commons. He got a scared expression and gestured to his two black friends next to him and said something along the lines to me, See, I kept my promise. I'm not racist now. And I chuckled and just said, Good, keep it up. I would never consider myself a violent person. But at that moment, as I held P there, I felt like if I didn't say something now, this prick could be the next Nick Fuentes. Chapter 4. The worst year ever. 2016. A horrific year. Not only was that disgusting, murderous, racist, rapist, pedophile called Donald Trump was elected as the United States president for the first time, but on top of that, my father returned himself to sender and took his own life that same summer. After a decade of bullying from my mother, my dad was at his wits' end. His only son was taken from him for more than 2 years, and he was slandered beyond repair or recognition. And he was in horrible pain from his spinal injury all those years ago, which caused so much medical debt. Life sucked for Dad. I don't really blame him for doing it now that I can put into context why, but I still would have rather he still be alive and here with us. Is that selfish? Maybe. I was just a kid when he died. I was only 14 years old, and it was summer vacation. I was on a road trip with my family, on our way to the coast of Maine and New Hampshire to visit Star Island, a vacation retreat island off the coast that you could stay at for a week to enjoy local history, events, and oceanographic interests, such as the Marine Lab on the island. I was super excited. I had gone once before and loved it. So when we stopped at a Wendy's hours from home to take a break, I was puzzled as to why my aunt was calling me. When I answered, she was hysterical. I couldn't remember exact words. I just remember the words, "He's dead." I asked who, and she couldn't bring herself to say it. Her brother, my father, was dead. I could hear that quiet mumble of shuffling that indicated the phone was handed off to my cousin, Faith, similarly crying but less hysterical in candor with her voice. She explained that my uncle had found my dad's body with the fridge open. I broke down. What else is there to do when the only man who really knew the true you, the only person in your corner rooting for you, the only person in your life who ever said they were truly proud of you at that point, dies suddenly and inexplicably? I felt my throat close in a tight lipped sob as I handed the phone to my mother. As my cousin told her the news, she smiled. A wicked smile, something about it so twisted, and I will never understand why or what it was. She began to laugh at this, to the rest of my family's dismay. At the drop of a hat, it was arranged for me to stay behind with my dad's side of the family during all of this, while my mom's side of the family, my mom, my grandma, and brother, all kept on their journey to Star Island without me. They left me behind to grieve, while they go off to have the time of their life. I spent the week with my aunt, and after that, I tried to spend a lot more time with them. Then later that summer, someone accidentally left the stove on, and the house they lived in burnt down, with all my stuff I had taken from my father's house with it. Hundreds of books, games, and my favorite consoles consumed by the flames. My GameCube and the rest of my classic Nintendo console collection entirely wiped out. Every single game gone. Every favorite movie and toy and blanket and pillow erased. I have since spent years trying to pick up the pieces and return my collection to what it once was, but I will never be able to restore the save files or the memories made that I had shared with them. When I confided in my friends at the beginning of ninth grade the tragedy that had struck me that summer, I was met with sickening betrayal. This knowledge became fuel for them to begin senselessly wrecking me to all who would be dastardly enough to lend an ear, and quickly spread through the school as fodder for verbal warfare towards a common target, me. I had to change schools to escape this, and as such, transferred to a charter school. This school was formed in 2009 by a group of highly educated hippies, and their combined compassion birthed this charter school that was perhaps what saved me from becoming further forsaken. At this charter school, there were only 150 students across all grades total at the time. Each class was much more tailored to the needs of the students in them. I grew close to my peers, and I made some really fantastic friendships that have lasted many years since, especially my bestest of best friends, MP. At first, I was a little rough around the edges, and boy was I edgy. Somehow, slowly, I came out of my shell and realized that this school was finally somewhere safe. I began to finally feel free, understood, heard, cared for. The teachers there were compassionate, down to earth, and well spoken, and every faculty member, from the janitor to the lunch lads and ladies, were amazingly dedicated to the education, health, and well being of the student body. For the first time, I was told I had potential, that I could be someone, not just a doormat. For the first time, someone looked at my art and said it looked good. For the first time, someone heard me sing a song or play ukulele and they said they liked how it sounded. For the first time. I wrote an essay and I was told it was well written. All of these firsts, denied to me for the previous 8 grades or so, were finally being heard. At first, I was resistant. I could never be good enough. I clearly and repeatedly was told I would never be at home. How would they know how I would turn out? But if it but it does turn out, they had a great point. They sowed the seeds in my heart, the flowers of self-worth and self-value. Still, the seed, despite its growth, never sees the flower. At the time, I was still horrifically depressed. I had made many attempts on my life since the age of 13 or so, but the most memorable is certainly the last attempt I made. Oh, hold on. Sorry about that. I got a phone call. I'm going to start from the beginning of this story about my last attempt. It was late springtime. I was skipping class, and it was just after lunch. There was a bus station less than a block from our school that was connected to a parking garage with roof access, and I had a plan. I decided that day, circa 2018, was my last. I marched up the steps, climbed the ledge, and I stood. I looked down at my feet, at the traffic below me. There was a lot of traffic. It was busy around noontime. It was the city, after all. A bus was just leaving. There's my target, right there, where the people always try to cut the bus off trying to turn out. The wind blew in my hair, whistling my ears and tucking a strand behind it, trying to tell me in a quiet whisper, please reconsider. But my eyes were focused. Unbeknownst to me, my best friend MP saw me. herself skipping class too on the commons below. She ran up those steps faster than any fitness gram pacer test ever could convince us to run, and before I could finish lifting my foot to step off, I felt a tug at my neckline as she pulled me by the hood of my sweatshirt off the ledge. As I regained my balance, she examined me. She held my shoulders, shaking slightly, and she flatly and loudly demanded, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And she, firm but unharming, slapped my cheek. "You can't die yet. We made a pact. We die together or we don't die at all." This was in reference to a time we were hanging out in the middle of the night, one of the hundreds of times she out to hang out, and we got onto the conversation of blood pacts. We jokingly agreed that if one of us decides to kill ourselves, we either do it together or hold off until the other one's ready. Our combined dark humor was escapism for the trifles and tribulations we both faced in our home life. We found comfort in each other, despite the horrors of our homes. This experience made me realize that the people in my world loved me more than I knew. Chapter 5: Lifelong Learning Curve. I started to see the world differently after having my life saved by my best friend. I began to appreciate and see how much effort and time people put into the world around them. Sure, I was still really depressed and suicidal, but the sun began to shine just a little bit brighter from that moment on. I started to challenge these things I was told about myself, and that I parroted from the people who made me rue the day that I was born, such as the constant insults from my mother of my body weight or personal value. I started to try and look at myself in the mirror even though it hurt. I began to rethink how I spoke to my inner self. Sure, it was subtle at first. I felt like I was faking something, pretending to be better than I really was. And maybe I was pretending in some ways at first too, but I was figuring out how to love myself despite that I was never shown how, so hey, give me a break. Part of this was in how my teachers in high school treated me. For the first time, I was treated with respect and kindness. I was told I could do great things and was given the space to heal and be my true self unapologetically for the whole time I was there. I may have been blind to it at the time, but I will forever cherish the kindness afforded to me by my teachers at this charter school. One of the most memorable impressions made on me in regards to learning was how to stand up for myself and would be, excuse me, one of the most memorable impressions made on me in regards to learning and how to stand up for myself would be the Dean of Student Life, J.H. His way of disciplining students was unique. Instead of sitting kids in quiet rooms with no real teaching moments, he would give a long winded, pseudo religious, pseudo scientific, borderline psychosis sounding speech about the origins of life and the universe. And you just had to sit there and listen for an hour until you finally give up and say you won't do whatever bad thing again, and you meant it. No one ever wanted to hear that spiel again, no, sir. Many students hated him for it, but God, I loved it. This is what detention should be: a means to teach students there are consequences to all actions, and sometimes those consequences are so silly or unexpected that it's a lot less worth the effort of doing the bad thing, like getting caught smoking or skipping class. It certainly prevented repeat offenses by a landslide compared to previously observed detention methods at other schools. J.H. was also one of the few adults in my life to ever willingly or otherwise stand up to my monster mom. Many times I would come to school bruised or shaken or otherwise harmed, and J.H. would notice and we would talk about it with the school nurse and counselor in tow. Then he would call my mom to hear her side, usually ending in my mom screaming at the top of her lungs that he has no authority to tell her how to discipline her child. This would always end up with me being sent to the local psych ward for a week, and I was isolated, where I would spend the week begging my grandparents to adopt me like they did my older brother, who was also mistreated by her before being adopted by them. Being denied, and then being sent back to live with the monster. This cycle happened enough times that I've lost count, but JH was never one to mince words on these explosive phone calls. If the Child Protective Service system were not so broken, my case would have been heard because of the honorable and righteous courage of J.H. documenting my experiences so poignantly. Unfortunately, there was another monster in our midst. When I was in 10th grade, I had a higher English reading level than my peers, and was transferred into an 11th grade reading class where I excelled. Unfortunately, there was a student there named M who one day followed me home and raped me in my own bedroom. My mother walked in on this happening, saw me covered in blood and held down by my neck, and did nothing to stop it, instead, closing the door and leaving us. I had to testify and advocate for myself entirely alone at 16 years old, and testify what he did to me in court to a judge, getting a restraining order against him. 5 years later, I decided to start college. Unbeknownst to me, he was also in attendance. When he eventually recognized me, I noticed stalking behavior starting to arise again, and I had to find my old restraining order documents to bring to the campus police. But they said they could only do anything if he touched me or my stuff, as my restraining order had since expired without me knowing. I had no idea it even could expire. This terrified me, and I began to carry a knife on my person at all times until he got his associate's degree and fucked off. Ever since this occasion, I have felt uneasy around tall, long haired, blonde, entitled pricks. But I feel that somehow this isn't an uncommon fear amongst anyone these days. Before I knew it, I was 18, and unsurprisingly, my mother's boot was itching to kick me to the curb as soon as the wrapping paper and Christmas decorations were put away. I was expecting this, and started seeing a man we'll call JK, where he allowed me to stay with him on the down low at his tiny little apartment until we saved up enough to get a bigger place. At first, everything was perfect between us. I was head over heels in love with his big brown eyes. However, once we settled in together, the cracks ever so slowly began to form. Once we moved into our first official apartment together, I started to notice his interest in me fading. He also began to mention his exes a lot more. The unkind comments also came out of nowhere. All these little red flags bounced off my head as I had no positive examples of a healthy relationship to go off of growing up. I thought it was all normal. The first time he cheated, I was pissed. We broke up, and he showed up to where I was couch surfing a few days, maybe a week or so later, in the middle of the fucking night, begging and sobbing and snot nosed for me to come back, and that their precious ex just left them again. I fell for it 4 times before I finally got it together and cut that nasty nut face out of my life for good. This did teach me something though. You attract what you put out. That is to say, if you treat yourself like shit, you will only attract people who will treat you accordingly. If you value yourself truly, and you aren't afraid to set boundaries and put your foot down, then you get treated with the respect you ask. That brings me to another point: asking. People are not mind readers, no matter how schizophrenic they are. You have to ask for things and tell people how you're feeling, or else they will likely literally never know. Don't leave people in your life guessing what you want. Tell them, and give them the space to tell you the same, as this is a bridge that goes both ways. If one side is not as structurally sound as the other and is often neglected, then it is not a very good bridge to keep up. Chapter 6: Healing in the Now. Despite these turbulent experiences of my upbringing, somehow I managed to come out on 2 feet. The biggest thanks I owe would be to the many therapists I've had over the years since age 5 to this day. Without having a professional in my life to keep me mentally on track, I might not have turned out so kindly. Through dedication and unrelenting, stubborn will, I make the daily choice to keep the march towards the bleak yet ever hopeful eternity we call life. Let me try that again. Through dedication and unrelenting, stubborn will, I make the daily choice to keep on the march towards the bleak yet ever hopeful eternity we call life. I made a choice to speak to my inner self with a gentler softness, and to always try to see the world through others' eyes in order to truly to try and fully understand what was previously unknown to my perspective. Even still, to this day, I encounter harassment online from small-minded bigots with no social life. To these clowns, I pay no mind. To me, it is a skill issue to get so pressed over the lives of complete strangers they will never meet in their lifetime. Even if they do encounter me, my existence in their presence will not change their life in any major way, shape, or form. So what's it to them that I had gone through what what I had gone through to be me? What I had gone through to be me? None your business is what I'm saying. At the end of the day, just remind yourself, you are the only you. There are no other yous in the world. Many of you, many like you, yes, but no exact clones or replicas exist. You are the only you that gets you up in the morning, breathes your air, blinks your eyes, thinks your thoughts, wears your style, talks in your voice. Be proud of that uniqueness, as it is the most alive part of us all. The haters are not the ones being you. They don't even know you. They only know their idea of you, and their snapshot impression is worth less than a half eaten soggy french fry in the gullet of a seagull at the Walmart parking lot. Be authentically, unapologetically you. We are on a dying rock, hurtling 67,100 miles per hour around the sun, clinging to the grass and begging Mother Nature to forgive us for repeated sins with our fingers twisted in R shaped hands behind our backs. Live your life to the fullest before it is too late. This memoir is not just a recounting of the storms I've weathered, but a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, my spirit. It is a voice. I don't like that. I like the short M dashes. For some reason, it corrects it to the long ones. Anyway, it is a voice for the younger me and for everyone who has ever felt diminished by the cruelty of others. Remember, the journey towards healing is ongoing, paved with small, deliberate choices made daily. The pain may leave scars, but those marks are proof that you survived. My hope is that sharing my story illuminates a path forward for those still navigating their own turbulent waters. Find your support, whether professional or personal, and use it as your anchor. Embrace the complexity of your own identity, for that is where your greatest power lies. The world needs unique light that only you can shine. Go forth, be kind to yourself, and never let the shadows of the past eclipse the brightness of your future. Thanks for watching if you watched this on a live stream. Otherwise, no one will ever see this. Yay. Bye.